Hey guys, tonight we slip into a different kind of bedtime story. The kind that smells faintly of gunpowder, horse sweat, and regret. You're standing in a place where the sun doesn't just shine, it attacks. It's the Wild West, and you probably won't survive this. The wind kicks up dust that stings your eyes. Your throat feels like it's been lined with sandpaper, and someone just spat tobacco juice 2 inches from your boot. Welcome home, partner. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments too. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The town you're standing in doesn't have a name so much as a description. Maybe they call it Dry Creek, or Dead Mule, or just the place with the crooked saloon. Every building leans slightly, as if trying to sneak into the shade. The boards creak when the wind shifts. There's a blacksmith hammering away at something red, hot and meaningless, and his hammer rings through the thin air like a heartbeat that refuses to stop. You can smell smoke, dust, and desperation, all the essentials of Western living. You take a step and immediately regret wearing sneakers. Oh wait, you don't have sneakers. It's 1872, and you're in cracked leather boots that weigh as much as your entire sense of optimism. They pinch your toes, rub your heels raw, and still let dust in from every angle. The ground crunches under you, and every eye on the street turns just slightly in your direction, weighing your worth. It's not that they're curious. It's that everyone here has learned to scan for threat before greeting. A tumbleweed makes its lazy debut across the main road, almost perfectly on cue, as if nature itself can't resist a cliché. Somewhere down the street, a dog barks once and gives up halfway through the second try. The local hotel is little more than a wooden cube with rooms stacked like coffins, and a porch sagging under the weight of old gossip. A faded sign above the Donji Ramandimales Abath Sir Amitimas. That last word feels particularly untrustworthy. You push through the swinging doors anyway, because the only other option is standing in the heat until you become jerky. Inside, it's cooler by about 2 degrees, enough to keep you from melting, but not enough to count as comfort. The air smells of sweat, kerosene, and yesterday's stew. A few travelers are slumped at tables, their hats tilted forward like they're ashamed to be awake. Behind the counter stands a woman with arms like fence posts, and a gaze sharp enough to shave with. She looks at you the way you might look at a mosquito hovering over your coffee. She says, in a tone that suggests you probably can't afford one. You nod, try to sound confident, and immediately give yourself away by coughing up a mouthful of dust. She snorts, grabs a key, and tosses it your way. 2nd floor, 3rd on the left. Don't mind the hole in the wall. Rat got creative last week. You mumble thanks and make your way upstairs, each step groaning under your weight like it's reconsidering its commitment to architecture. The hallway smells faintly of whiskey and regret. Your room is exactly what you expect: a bed that sags like it lost a fight, a window that won't open, and wallpaper designed by someone who clearly hated joy. But it's yours, for tonight at least. You sit on the bed, and a puff of dust rises like a spirit offended at being disturbed. Welcome to your new life. Out the window, the street hums with the slow, half-asleep rhythm of frontier survival. A cowboy leans against a hitching post, muttering to his horse like it's a better conversationalist than anyone else around. Across the way, a blacksmith's fire glows in the twilight, sparks dancing like drunken fireflies. The saloon doors flap lazily, inviting trouble in and letting slightly more trouble out. You can feel the heat still radiating from the dirt, seeping through your boots, your jeans, probably wool trousers, and right up into your bones. There's no shade except what your hat pretends to offer. And water. That's a punchline waiting for a setup. Here's your first historical fact of the night. The real Wild West towns weren't all endless shootouts and gunfights at high noon. Most of the time they were just boring. Dust, hunger, paperwork if you were unlucky. People spent more time fixing fences and chasing runaway chickens than dueling at dawn. But Hollywood figured you wouldn't watch that, so they added the drama. Still, you wouldn't last long here. Water is scarce. Food's mostly salted meat and hardtack, and the only thing that grows faster than cactus is rumor. You think about ordering a drink, but the water comes from a well rumored to be slightly haunted. You order it anyway, because dehydration seems worse than ghosts. The glass clinks down in front of you, cloudy and suspicious. You sip. It tastes like copper, dust, and the faint memory of frog. You swallow anyway, and wonder how many people made it to California before dysentery decided otherwise. Someone nearby is talking about a stagecoach robbery. Apparently a group of outlaws made off with a shipment of silver coins last week. The sheriff, according to gossip, was real busy playing cards at the time. You try not to laugh, but the sound that escapes your throat is halfway between a cough and disbelief. A man at the next table turns his head slowly toward you, his eyes narrow under a hat brim wider than your moral boundaries. "You from around here?" he asks. You shake your head. Big mistake. In the West, admitting you're new is like painting a target on your back. He grins, showing teeth that look like they've seen too many bar fights and too few toothbrushes. "Figured," he says. "You still got both boots." You decide it's time to head back to your room before conversation turns into a duel. As you climb the stairs again, you can't help noticing how every floorboard seems to sigh in sympathy with your exhaustion. Outside your window, the sky bruises into night. Stars begin to crawl out, one by one, sharp and endless. No light pollution, no planes, no hum of traffic. Just silence broken by the occasional far-off coyote song. You lie back on the bed, the mattress a weird mix of hay and mystery lumps. You close your eyes, trying to imagine what it would take to survive here. No phones, no takeout, no air conditioning. Just grit, guts, and probably several questionable life choices. A thought drifts through your tired mind. People really lived like this. They crossed deserts, built towns, lost them again. Some struck gold, most just struck out. Historians still argue whether the Wild West was a lawless nightmare or just an exaggerated phase of expansion. But either way, you're stuck in it now. And speaking of exaggeration, here's a fun fringe tidbit. Some travelers used to rub crocodile dung mixed with oil on their skin as sunscreen. Not here. Exactly. More an ancient Egyptian thing. But given how desperate you feel under this sun, you'd probably consider it. Maybe the frontier's real danger wasn't guns. It was the UV index. As the night deepens, the temperature drops. Fast. You curl tighter under your blanket, realizing the desert doesn't do moderation. Scorching days, freezing nights, and somewhere between the two, a kind of peace. The wind outside whistles through the cracks in the wall, sounding like a faraway train. A sound you'll come to miss someday, when real trains change everything. Your last waking thought is of that sheriff's badge you glimpsed earlier, tarnished and half buried in dust. Someone wore that once, maybe thinking they'd bring order here. You wonder how that turned out. Probably not great. But tomorrow, you'll find out. Morning doesn't so much arrive in the Wild West as it ambushes you. There's no gentle sunrise here. No soft beams of light peeking through lace curtains. Instead, the sun kicks down the door of your eyelids and shouts, "Get up, partner, time to suffer." You blink against the light leaking through warped slats of the shutter, the air already hot enough to make your mouth feel like a wool sock. You didn't really sleep. You just closed your eyes and waited for dawn to admit it was time. The bed smells faintly of old tobacco and something that might once have been stew. Your stomach grumbles, a low complaint that sounds suspiciously like, "Why are we still doing this?" So, you drag yourself downstairs, each step echoing the complaint of wood that's seen better days and worse boots. The boarding house, dining room, isn't so much a restaurant as it is a survival challenge. A long plank table stretches across the room, covered with chipped plates and a few brave souls attempting to chew their breakfast without looking too disappointed. The air smells of burnt coffee, overboiled beans, and the faint tang of desperation. You sit down next to a man who looks like he hasn't smiled since the Civil War ended. He's spooning something grey into his mouth, eyes half shut in grim concentration. You assume it's oatmeal, but it could also be sawdust soup. You're not sure you want to ask. The woman from last night, same arms, same glare, slaps a plate down in front of you. On it one biscuit, hard as math, a scoop of scrambled eggs that seem to be held together by sheer willpower, and something that might be bacon if bacon had known heartbreak. You take a bite. It crunches in a way eggs should not crunch. You chew anyway, because calories are calories. Your drink arrives in a tin cup. Coffee, allegedly. You take a sip, and immediately understand why frontier folks were so quick to anger. It's because their taste buds were under attack. Bitter, gritty, lukewarm. You could probably use it to strip paint. But it does wake you up, in the same way an electric fence wakes up a curious cow. A few cowhands at the next table are arguing over who's going to drive a cattle herd north. One claims he saw Comanche scouts near the river. Another insists that's nonsense. That the scouts were actually just a pack of stray dogs. Historians still argue whether most frontier, Indian raids were genuine attacks or paranoia amplified by whiskey and boredom. Either way, everyone's armed and no one trusts anyone else. You glance at the door, thinking about how you'd probably last about 15 minutes outside the town limits. Maybe 10 if you skipped breakfast. Speaking of survival, here's your first mainstream fact of the morning. The average settler's diet in the 1870s west was a bland rotation of bread, beans, bacon, and coffee. Fresh vegetables were rarer than polite duels, and milk spoiled faster than your mood. People tried canning or salting everything, which worked. If you didn't mind your entire digestive system becoming an emotional support cactus. There's a sudden commotion at the far end of the room. Someone's shouting about a stolen horse. A chair clatters. You don't even turn your head. You've already learned that out here. Other people's problems are contagious. Instead, you focus on finishing your meal, pretending that crunchy eggs are a delicacy. When you step outside, the town is already awake in that chaotic, dusty way small western towns do. The blacksmith's hammer rings again, the smell of scorched metal thick in the air. A couple of kids chase a chicken down the street, laughing like they've never heard of boredom. A group of miners loads supplies into a wagon. Picks, shovels, barrels of something that probably won't explode but might. And you stand there, trying to decide what exactly a person does here. There's no office, no grocery store, no coffee shop with Wi-Fi. The only network around is a telegraph line strung so loose it hums when the wind blows. A wiry man in a sweat, stained hat notices you loitering and calls out. You looking for work, or just lost? You open your mouth, realize you have no marketable 19th century skills, and mumble something about just passing through. He laughs, spits, and says, "Ain't we all?" Then he strolls off, leaving you with that weirdly philosophical aftertaste people in this century seem to produce effortlessly. Your stomach still grumbles. Breakfast wasn't enough. You wander toward the general store, hoping for something edible, or at least something new. Inside, the air is cooler, heavy with the scent of flour, leather, and pipe smoke. Shelves hold everything from nails to licorice to rifle cartridges. The storekeeper, an older man with a beard that could qualify as a landmark, gives you the once-over and nods. "You the drifter what came in last night?" You nod back. He grins faintly. "Figured. Folks here can smell fresh dust on a man." You ask if he's got any food that doesn't fight back. He chuckles, reaches behind the counter, and sets down a jar of pickled eggs. The brine is cloudy, the eggs vaguely threatening. 3 cents apiece, he says proudly. You consider the jar. You consider hunger. You consider your life choices. Then you decide maybe hunger's not that bad. He leans forward, lowering his voice. "We had a preacher pass through last week. Said the world's gonna end soon. I told him, 'Mister, out here it already has.'" He laughs at his own joke, then immediately coughs like his lungs disagree. You leave him to his philosophy and step back into the sun. A buzzard circles lazily overhead, as if waiting for your Yelp review on frontier dining. The ground radiates heat, the kind that turns your shadow into a puddle. You find a water pump near the livery stable and crank the handle until a trickle of muddy water splashes out. You cup it in your hands. It's warm, metallic, and tastes faintly of regret. You drink anyway. Somewhere nearby, a harmonica starts playing. Off-key but earnest. You follow the sound to the edge of town, where a prospector is crouched beside a wash pan, swirling mud and grit like he's stirring soup. "Trying your luck?" you ask. He glances up, squints, and grins through a beard that's mostly dust. "Ain't luck," he says. "It's patience." Then he tilts the pan, showing you the tiny flecks glinting in the sun. "Mecca," he admits. "Not gold. But a man can dream. Can't he?" He laughs again, a dry, cracked sound, and goes back to panning nothing into smaller nothings. You sit nearby, watching him work. The rhythm is hypnotic. The swirl, the sift, the sun glaring down. You can almost understand why people came here chasing fortune. The promise of something shiny, just out of reach, is enough to make anyone gamble their sanity. Historians still argue whether the gold rush made America or just broke a few million backs along the way. Probably both. A wind gust carries dust straight into your eyes. You blink hard, cursing softly under your breath. The prospector doesn't notice. He's too busy chasing ghosts of gold. By noon, the heat is merciless. You retreat toward the saloon's shade, where a few locals lounge like lizards on whiskey. Someone plays cards. Someone else snores loudly enough to shake the window panes. You sit at the bar again, this time just for a cold drink. Though cold is a relative term here. The bartender pours you a sarsaparilla, a sweet herbal concoction that tastes like root beer's great grandfather and medicinal regret. It's oddly comforting, though. As you sip, a man beside you mutters, "Used to be buffalo out there, far as the eye could see. Now they're gone. Shot, mostly. Or scared off by the trains." You nod, not sure what to say. He shrugs, staring into his glass. Progress, they call it. Seems more like hunger with better branding. Outside, the sun begins to tilt westward, but it's still blinding. You step out, watch a dust devil spin lazily across the street, lifting straw and secrets. You can't help but laugh quietly. It's absurd, this place. You've survived exactly one morning, and already your lips are cracked, your stomach empty, your patience thin. You imagine modern influencers trying to rough it. Here for content, day 2? Just discovered hydration is a myth. Still, something in the air keeps you from walking away. Maybe it's the stubbornness of everyone who stayed. The blacksmith hammering, the prospector swirling his pan, the woman serving breakfast like she's single, handedly keeping civilization from falling apart. You think about breakfast again, about how it wasn't really food so much as fuel. about how every bite felt like a small negotiation with survival. And yet, you did it. You're still here. Dusty, thirsty, and underqualified, but here. The sky deepens to copper as the sun lowers, shadows stretching long across the street. The day hums quieter now, softer, like the town is collectively exhaling. You lean against a post, hat tipped low, watching that same tumbleweed roll by again. Maybe the same one, maybe its cousin. You half smile. In this world, even weeds keep moving. Somewhere down the street, a bell rings. Supper time, maybe. You're not sure you can face another meal like breakfast, but your body disagrees. You head toward the scent of stew, thin, salty, but warm, and realize that in the West, that's about as close to comfort as it gets. Tomorrow, you'll meet the sheriff. But for now, you eat in peace, or at least something close enough to it. The next morning starts with a noise you can't quite place. Half whistle, half groan. Like a kettle deciding whether to live or die. You open one bleary eye to find sunlight knifing through the gaps in your shutters, carving stripes of gold across the dusty floorboards. Outside, boots scuff, horses snort, and someone yells the word, sheriff, like it's both a warning and a prayer. You stretch, bones creaking, back protesting. And remember that, yes, you're still in the Wild West. The pillow smells like smoke, the sheet feels like sandpaper, and you're starting to understand why everyone out here looks like they've been frowning since birth. Downstairs, the usual breakfast. Same grey eggs. Same bitter coffee. Same suspicion in the air. Waits for you. You're halfway through choking it down when the saloon door slaps open and a tall, weathered man steps in. His boots hit the floor with a rhythm that immediately quiets the room. He's got that lawman energy, calm, tired, and perpetually 2 seconds away from drawing a gun. This, apparently, is the sheriff. He's wearing a star that's lost its shine, pinned to a vest that's seen too many suns. His face is a topographical map of every bad decision he's had to witness. When his eyes sweep the room, people look away, like kids hiding test answers from a strict teacher. You, he says, his gaze landing on you. You're the new one. Every muscle in your body agrees to panic. Os. Maybe. He smirks, the faintest crack in an otherwise granite expression. Name's Carter. Sheriff Carter. Just making my rounds. He gestures toward the empty chair across from you. Mind if I sit? You don't, of course. You just try to look like you belong in a century, where brushing your teeth is optional. He lowers himself into the chair with the wary grace of a man who's seen it all. And probably arrested most of it. Town's quiet this week, he says, though the tension in his voice makes you doubt it. Mostly miners, ranch hands, a few drifters. Trouble comes in waves. You can feel it before it hits. You nod, like that's not the most ominous thing you've heard before breakfast. He sips from your coffee without asking. An alpha move if there ever was one, and makes a face. Still tastes like burnt nails. Guess some things never improve. You ask how long he's been sheriff, trying to sound conversational. 6 years, he says. Which is about 5.5 longer than I planned. He leans back, eyes narrowing toward the window, where the main street bakes in the rising heat. Not here. Law's not the badge. It's the stare. You hold someone's eyes long enough, they'll tell you who they are. He glances back at you. You've got city in your gaze. Not much desert yet. You try to laugh, but it comes out nervous. Guess I'm still adjusting. Yeah, he says quietly. You will. Or you won't. Outside, a gunshot cracks the air. Neither of you flinch, mostly because he doesn't, and you've decided to follow his lead. A few seconds later, a shout echoes, then the low murmur of curiosity that always follows violence. Carter stands, adjusting his hat. Breakfast is over, he mutters. You might as well come see what passes for excitement around here. You follow him outside, squinting against the sunlight. The streets gathered a small crowd. A man's lying face down in the dust near the saloon steps, clutching his leg and swearing in creative, surprisingly poetic bursts. Bullet just grazed him, Carter says. Again. He looks toward a nervous young cowboy holding a smoking revolver. Son, he sighs. What did I tell you about practicing quick draws in town? The kid stammers. It was just for fun. Sheriff. Carter rolls his eyes. Fun's what got your brother missing 2 toes. He confiscates the gun, empties the cylinder, and hands it back with a single bullet. You want to play cowboy, you do it outside the fence line. The crowd disperses, disappointed. You realize most people here are just waiting for something to happen. Anything to break the monotony. In a world this slow, even danger's a form of entertainment. The sheriff turns to you. Lesson 1, most trouble out here ain't evil. It's boredom with a weapon. You follow him as he resumes his patrol, which mostly involves nodding at folks and pretending the town runs smoother than it does. He points out landmarks, the telegraph office, the jail, 1 cell, 2 splinters, and the undertaker's shop, strategically next door. Saves time, he says dryly. You chuckle, and for the first time, he almost smiles. Then he points to a bulletin nailed crookedly on the post outside his office. When did el asmarsechi stiatuh robr 500 d8 or AIV? The sketch looks like every outlaw stereotype, combined squinting eyes, wide, brimmed hat, scruffy beard. Carter taps the paper. March thinks he's Robin Hood, stealing from the rich, giving to himself. Word is he's been seen near the canyon. If you're planning to wander out there, don't. You nod, though you can't help but feel the tiniest flicker of curiosity. Inside the sheriff's office, it's cooler, barely. A single window lets in light, and a wanted poster college covers the back wall like a scrapbook of poor choices. A half-eaten sandwich sits on the desk beside a stack of papers, and an empty whiskey bottle doing its best impression of office decor. Carter sits, tipping his chair back. People think being sheriff's all gunfights and glory. Truth is, it's mostly paperwork and trying not to get shot while doing it. He flips open a ledger, sighs, and says, Someone stole the church bell again. That's the 3rd time this year. You blink. Why would anyone steal a bell? He looks up. Brass cells. Plus, people like ringing things after whiskey. You can't argue with that logic. Here's your historical fact for the section. Frontier sheriffs were rarely trained lawmen. Most were elected locals with good aim or, more often, just available. Their main job wasn't dueling outlaws. It was collecting taxes, serving warrants, and breaking up drunken brawls before they turned fatal. Hollywood turned them into legends. Reality made them bureaucrats with better hats. But sometimes, the line between peacekeeper and participant blurred. Historians still argue whether famous sheriffs like White Earp upheld justice or simply enforced their own brand of order. In truth, the West didn't run on laws. It ran on reputations. Carter glances up, as if reading your thoughts. Out here, he says, justice isn't blind. It just squints real hard. You laugh softly, and he finally lets the smile through. It changes his whole face, from granite to something almost human. Tell you what, he says, standing. You stick around long enough, you'll see what keeps folks alive out here. It ain't courage. It's timing. You step back into the sunlight, blinking as the brightness washes over you. The town's rhythm picks up again. The hammering, the horses, the lazy shuffle of people pretending not to be afraid. A stray dog trots past, tongue lolling, tail wagging like it knows secrets. You toss it a piece of hard biscuit from your pocket. It sniffs, decides you're worth tolerating, and follows you for half a block. At the general store, the owner waves you in. Heard you been talking to Carter, he says. Careful with that one. Honest man in a dishonest place never lasts long. You tilt your head. You don't trust the sheriff. He shrugs. Trust's expensive. Out here, we rent it by the hour. That line sticks with you as you walk toward the livery stable, where the smell of hay and horses fills the air. You run your hand along a saddle, feeling the smooth wear of leather shaped by miles of hard travel. It's beautiful in a rough way, like the whole West. Maybe. A stable boy looks up. You ride an out. Not today, you say. Just looking. He nods, wise beyond his years. That's how most folks start. Looking. Then they don't come back. You decide to take the long way back to your room, following the edge of town where scrub grass meets endless open plain. The horizon stretches wide and empty, a reminder that everything out here, freedom, danger, survival, depends on how far you're willing to walk. The sun dips lower, painting the sky in molten orange. Somewhere, a church bell rings, apparently found again, and the sound echoes through the dry air. You smile faintly. Maybe the sheriff's right. Out here, justice doesn't sleep. It just squints. You wake to the sound of a hammer again, though this time it's not the blacksmith. It's the sound of a man nailing up new debt, notices on the post outside your boarding house window. The rhythmic thud carries through the walls, steady as a heartbeat. You roll over and mutter something about capitalism being the true outlaw here, but the only thing that answers is the rustle of your thin blanket. Downstairs, the morning smells faintly of old coffee and economic despair. The landlady, still running the place with the authority of a minor deity, nods at you without bothering to fake a smile. You'll want to eat before the store opens, she says. Prices went up again. You ask, on what? She replies, everything that isn't nailed down. You sit at the table, nibbling dry toast that tastes more like dust than flour, and notice the men around you murmuring about wages, mines, and how silver ain't worth the sweat anymore. It seems like the entire town's running on IOUs and wishful thinking. You sip your gritty coffee and think, so this is what inflation feels like without Wi-Fi complaints. By the time you step outside, the heat's already sliding down your collar, sticking your shirt to your back. You walk toward the general store again, hoping to find something small to eat later. Jerky, maybe. Something that won't bankrupt you. The sign over the door now reads CRDT SSPNDUNTL FARTR notice. Inside, the storekeeper's beard looks a little grayer than it did yesterday. He's muttering to himself, counting coins that don't seem to add up. When he sees you, he gives a tired shrug. Prices went up overnight, he says. Stagecoach got robbed again. Took half our salt and flour shipment. Now folks are charging a dime for what used to cost a penny. You look at the shelves, half empty. The pickled eggs are gone. So is the jerky. Only a few tins of beans remain, stacked neatly like they're on display at the Museum of Edible Disappointment. You ask how anyone's supposed to survive like this. He chuckles. They don't. They just get creative. He points to a small card tacked beside the register. A CCP TAD PMMNT square ABOR OR Geldi Desti POR Eno UHTU Fulmi. You reach into your pocket, pull out a few coins. The last of what you've got. Not enough for a full meal. Maybe enough for a can of beans and a questionable piece of dried apple. The storekeeper nods solemnly as he wraps your purchase in paper. Careful not to eat that all at once, he says. Tomorrow, it'll cost more. You step outside again, squinting into the sunlight, and realize what the West's real enemy was. It wasn't bandits or snakes. It was debt. Here's your historical fact of the section. Most settlers didn't strike gold or silver. They worked for mining companies, paid in scrip, a kind of private currency only valid at the company store. It was like living inside a bad loyalty program where the reward for working hard was the chance to buy more overpriced beans. Historians still argue whether this system was exploitation or just economic evolution in its rawest, dustiest form. Either way, it meant your wallet was usually empty and your stomach rarely full. You wander toward the saloon, drawn by the sound of clinking glasses and laughter that sounds forced but determined. The piano's slightly out of tune again, which somehow makes the song more honest. Inside, men crowd around tables, cards in hand, hopes in tatters. You take a seat at the bar, nodding to the bartender, who gives you that look that says you can't afford whiskey, can you? You order water. He raises an eyebrow, then pours it from a jug that looks suspiciously murky. 2 cents, he says flatly. You hand him a coin, sip, and try not to think about where that water came from. At the table nearest to you, a group of miners argue over a poker hand. The pile of coins between them looks smaller than the dust on their boots. One man, red-faced and desperate, slams his hand down. "I'll in," he says, pushing a few silver coins and a worn pocket watch forward. Another man, calm and thin as a fence post, raises an eyebrow. "You sure, Pete? That watch worth the time you're gambling away?" Pete doesn't answer. The cards flip. The silence thickens. Then laughter, cruel, hollow, fills the air. Pete lost. He stands up slowly, nodding once, and walks out the door without looking back. The winner collects his spoils with a shrug. Easy come, easier go. You sit there, realizing that in the Wild West, luck is the only real currency. And you, with your modern sensibilities and debit card that doesn't exist yet, are bankrupt in more ways than one. The bartender catches your eye. "You play?" he asks. You shake your head. "Smart," he says. "Nobody wins in this town, just changes who's losing." Outside, the air shimmers with heat. A horse kicks dust beside the hitching post, snorting like it knows something you don't. Across the street, a woman in a faded blue dress leans in a doorway, counting coins in her hand and frowning at how little they add up to. You start to walk, and she calls out. "You looking for work?" "Depends what kind," you reply, trying to sound capable. She laughs. "Don't worry, not that kind. The church needs someone to patch the roof. Pays $1. $1 sounds like salvation." "I'm in," you say. 10 minutes later, you're standing on a ladder in the heat, hammering nails into warped shingles, while a preacher watches from below, fanning himself with a Bible. "You ever done roofing before?" he asks. "No," you admit. He nods thoughtfully. "Neither have I, but I do it every Sunday." You smile at that one. The humor's dry, but so is the air, and it fits perfectly. You finish the patch job by late afternoon, sweat stinging your eyes, arms aching, lips cracked. The preacher hands you a single silver dollar, still warm from his palm. You hold it up to the light, like it's something holy. "Careful with that," he says. "Out here, it's easier to lose money than a shadow." You walk back toward the saloon, intending to spend maybe a nickel on something resembling dinner. But as you pass the general store, you see a small crowd gathered around a wagon. A man in a top hat stands on it, shouting about investment opportunities. You edge closer. He's selling shares in a new silver claim up north. "Guaranteed returns," he yells. "You could be rich by Christmas." You almost laugh. You've read about these scams in history books. Boomtown frauds, fake mines, empty promises. But standing here, dusty, hungry, with a single coin burning a hole in your hand, you understand the temptation. The man's eyes find yours. "You, friend, don't you want to change your luck?" You think about it. You think about your empty stomach and your aching arms. And then you think about the preacher's warning, easier to lose money than a shadow. You keep walking. Back at the boarding house, the sun sets in long, bleeding streaks of orange and purple. You sit on the porch steps, the dollar coin turning over and over in your fingers. The metal catches the light, winking like it's in on the joke. A shadow falls over you. It's Sheriff Carter, leaning on the porch rail, hat tipped low. "Heard you did some honest work today," he says. You nod. He smiles faintly. "That's rare around here. Most folks figure cheating's faster." You ask him if it ever changes. If people ever stop chasing things they'll never catch. He takes a long breath. Nah. The West runs on hope. Always has. Hope and coffee strong enough to melt spoons. You laugh softly, and he tips his hat before walking off into the twilight. As night falls, you climb into bed, the coin still in your palm. It's warm, heavy, and feels like a promise you're not sure you can keep. You tuck it under the pillow, close your eyes, and listen to the soft creak of the building settling in the wind. Out there, someone's still gambling, still lying, still dreaming. And you're surviving, for now. Your quirky tidbit for the night drifts into your mind. As you fall asleep, some frontier towns actually used baked bread loaves as emergency currency during shortages. Which means technically, someone somewhere once bought a horse with a sandwich. History's weird like that. The last thing you hear before drifting off is a voice from the street below. A drunk man singing, slightly off, key but full of heart. Money's like whiskey. It burns and it's gone. But the West keeps on spinning till morning's first yawn. You smile into your pillow. Broke, dusty, and weirdly content. The desert doesn't wake up gently. It just changes temperature. You blink against the first rays of daylight, leaking through the cracks in your window, and realize that even before you open your eyes fully, your throat is already dry. There's no such thing as morning dew out here. The air just forgets what moisture is overnight. You drag yourself out of bed, boots scraping against the floorboards, and stretch until your spine pops like an old rifle. Your single silver dollar clinks softly in your pocket, a reminder that you're technically employed. Though, surviving by threadbare luck might be the better term. Outside, the street is quieter than usual. Even the blacksmith's hammer takes its time getting started today. You squint toward the far edge of town, where the sand seems to shimmer unnaturally, blurring into waves. Someone once told you that desert mirages are the land's way of showing you what you most want. You'd settle for a glass of cold water and a fan. A wagon rattles past, its wheels squealing in protest, and the driver, sunburned, bearded, wearing a hat the size of a satellite dish, calls out, "Headin' to the mine, friend! You comin' or stayin' pretty?" You're not sure which one is safer, but curiosity wins again. "Mine," you echo. "Yep. Silver Creek," he says. "They're hiring. Pays fair if the rocks behave." The man grins through a mouth missing more teeth than it has. "Ain't glamorous," he adds, "but it's better than starvin'." You glance back at town, dusty, still half asleep, and decide that anything labeled "better than starving" sounds like an upgrade. "Mind if I ride along?" He jerks a thumb at the back of the wagon. "Long as you don't complain about the smell." You climb aboard and instantly understand the warning. The wagon's loaded with pickaxes, ropes, dynamite, and several men who appear to have given up on bathing as a concept. You nod politely and find a seat on a sack of something lumpy and suspiciously alive. The journey takes most of the morning, the heat rising in layers, until it feels like you're traveling through invisible soup. The landscape changes only in shade. Pale sand gives way to slightly darker sand, interrupted by the occasional cactus standing proudly, like it owns the place. One of the miners sitting beside you passes a tin flask your way. "Don't worry," he says with a wink. "Ain't whiskey." You take a cautious sip. It's definitely something. Warm, metallic, faintly bitter. "Water," he confirms. "Sort of." You decide not to ask what the qualifier means. He grins, sensing your hesitation. you'll get used to it. Out here, if it don't kill ya, it's hydration. By midday, the wagon reaches the mine. A collection of wooden shacks clinging to the side of a hill like nervous barnacles. Smoke curls from a blacksmith's forge. Men shout, and the sharp clink of metal on stone fills the air. The whole place smells like sweat, sulfur, and ambition. You hop down from the wagon, squinting at the entrance to the mine. It's nothing more than a jagged mouth cut into the hillside, dark and yawning. The air around it feels 10 degrees cooler. A small mercy. The foreman, a burly man with a red scarf tied around his neck, and a voice like gravel in a barrel, looks you over. You ever swung a pick? You shake your head. He grunts. Well, you got arms. You'll learn. And just like that, you're a miner. He hands you a pickaxe and gestures toward the mine entrance. Don't wander too deep. Some tunnels ain't stable. And if the canary stops singing, start running. You blink. You have canaries. Used to, he says. Now we use rats. Cheaper. You're not sure if he's joking. Inside the mine, the world changes. The air grows heavy, damp and cool. The first relief you felt all day. But it's not clean air. It's thick with dust, the smell of rock and sweat mingling, until it feels like you're breathing exhaustion itself. The only light comes from a few lanterns hung along the walls, flickering weakly, as if uncertain they want to commit. You follow another miner down a narrow tunnel, the sound of your own footsteps, mixing with the steady clink, clink, clink of tools striking stone. It's strangely hypnotic. Dust drifts through the lamplight like lazy ghosts. Somewhere ahead, a man hums an old song, something slow and sad, about rivers that never dry and women who never wait. You raise the pickaxe, swing, and immediately regret every life choice that brought you to this moment. The shock runs up your arms, rattling your teeth. The rock barely notices. The miner beside you chuckles. Don't fight it. Let the swing do the work. You ain't chopping wood. You're persuading the mountain. You try again, and this time the rhythm clicks a little better. You can almost imagine that you're part of something ancient. Humans versus Earth, forever trying to convince stone to give up its secrets. Auras blur. The noise, the sweat, the constant ache. They all melt into a strange, dreamlike repetition. You lose track of time until the foreman's voice echoes down the tunnel. Break time! Outside, the sun's lower, but still brutal. The miners gather near a water barrel, dipping tin cups and passing them around. The water's warm, but no one complains. One man sighs happily after drinking, muttering, better than pay. You take a sip and try not to imagine what's floating in it. Still, the taste, mineral, metallic, alive somehow, anchors you to the moment. As you sit, one of the older miners starts telling a story. Heard tell there's gold up north, he says. Real gold, not this silver dust nonsense. Another miner laughs. Heard that same story 15 years ago. Maybe so. The first says, but one day, someone will find it. Historians still argue whether those old tales of hidden veins and lost mines were propaganda or genuine rumor. Either way, they kept men digging long after reason said stop. Hope, it turns out, is heavier than any ore. Here's your mainstream historical fact for the section. The Comstock lode, discovered in Nevada in 1859, was one of the richest silver deposits ever found. It sparked a frenzy that built towns overnight and emptied them just as fast. But most miners never struck it rich. They worked for wages, inhaled dust, and died early from something politely called miner's lung. You watch the men around you. Faces streaked with dirt, eyes bright with stubbornness, and wonder which of them still believes they'll be the lucky one. A few feet away, a miner unwraps his lunch. A piece of salted pork, a biscuit, and something unidentifiable that might have once been a vegetable. You hungry? He asks, holding it out. You hesitate, then accept. The pork is so salty it could start its own ocean, but your stomach doesn't care. You eat in silence, the air buzzing with flies that don't seem to mind the heat. A strange thought crosses your mind. How much of human history is just people chasing shiny things underground? Someone laughs nearby. Careful, a man says. If you find fool's gold, don't tell the foreman. He'll dock your pay for wasting time. That's your quirky tidbit of the night. Some mining towns had actual fines for reporting too much gold, because fools wasted valuable hours chasing glittery pyrite instead of silver. The shift whistle blows again, and you trudge back inside. The air feels thicker now, the lanterns dimmer. Every swing of your pick echoes deeper into the tunnel, a steady reminder that you're a guest in the mountain, not a conqueror. Somewhere in the darkness, the rat squeaks once, then goes silent. Out, the foreman shouts instantly. Everyone out. Panic cuts through the air like lightning. Tools clatter. Men push. Dust swirls. You stumble after the others as the tunnel groans above you, the ceiling shedding pebbles like rain. The light at the entrance glows brighter ahead. Hope in motion. You burst into the open air, just as a low rumble rolls behind you. The mine holds, for now, but a fresh crack snakes across the entrance, a warning signed in dirt. The foreman wipes sweat from his brow. That's the earth telling us she's tired, he says grimly. We'll let her rest. Everyone nods, wordless. You sit down hard, lungs burning, heart thudding. The desert sky above you feels endless, merciless, and, somehow, alive. As dusk settles, the men light a small fire. Someone breaks out a harmonica. Someone else tells a joke about a preacher, a horse, and a cactus. You laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's proof you're still here. The fire crackles, sparks rising into the violet sky. Around you, the miners drift into silence, staring into the flames like they're searching for something shiny there too. You look down at your hands, blistered, grimy, trembling, and think about how the West keeps testing you. Heat, hunger, hope. Every day a gamble you didn't sign up for but keep playing anyway. By the time the stars appear, sharp, close, endless, you're too tired to think. You roll into your bedroll, the earth hard beneath you, and listen to the low hum of wind passing over the rocks. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howls. The desert answers with silence, and for the first time, you start to believe that maybe surviving the Wild West isn't about winning. It's about refusing to lose. You wake before dawn to the sound of shouting. Not the good kind, either. The kind that carries through the dry air with enough anger to sandpaper your nerves. You blink, drag yourself upright, and realize the noise is coming from the street below your window. Two men are arguing near the sheriff's office. One of them, tall and lean with a coat that's seen better centuries, is waving a wanted poster in the other's face. The second man, shorter, broader, definitely less sober, keeps shaking his head and saying, "That ain't me! That's my cousin." You lean out just far enough to catch the morning light spilling over the street. The sheriff's office door swings open, and out steps Sheriff Carter, the same calm man who once told you the West ran on hope and bitter coffee. He doesn't even raise his voice. "Boys," he says, "if I have to arrest you both, breakfast's gonna be delayed, and I don't miss breakfast." The men freeze, exchange a look, then slowly back away. One of them mutters, "Sorry, Sheriff." Carter nods once, tucks the wanted poster under his arm, and says to no one in particular, "The trick to law out here is timing. You arrive just after the bad part. You can't help but smile. It's too early for justice, but it's apparently right on time for coffee." Downstairs at the boarding house, the landlady's already got a pot brewing, black as midnight and strong enough to dissolve regrets. She slides you a chipped mug and says, "Careful, sugar. That'll put hair on your conscience." You take a sip and instantly regret it. She's right. Outside, the town feels half awake, caught between law and lawlessness. Posters flutter on the boards, 100 reward. Dead or alive. It's unsettling how casual that phrase has become. You pass the saloon, the blacksmith, the stable, and every single person seems to have a sidearm or a story about one. A man polishing his revolver on the porch nods at you. You carry, he asks. You shake your head. He smirks. Brave or stupid? Hard to tell which this early in the day. You decide not to answer. The Wild West loved its lawmen almost as much as it loved ignoring them. By 1875, the ratio of sheriffs to criminals was roughly 1-2. Good luck with that. Every town had its hero. Some genuine, some exaggerated, some entirely made up by newspapers desperate for sales. Historians still argue whether the myth of the lone lawman was born from reality or from a collective desire to believe that chaos could be tamed by a single badge and a half decent aim. The truth, as usual, probably involved more paperwork and less heroism. Sheriff Carter calls out to you as you pass. You ever worked a lunch shift at a jail? You blink. Is that a trick question? He grins. Nope. My deputy quit. Said the job didn't have enough adventure. You can't imagine how feeding prisoners qualifies as adventure, but at least it sounds safer than mining. What's it pay? 50 cents and the right to complain, he says. You take it. By noon, you're standing inside the sheriff's office with a pot of stew, a stack of tin bowls, and the uneasy feeling that you've somehow joined law enforcement by accident. The single jail cell holds 2 men, one asleep, one whittling something out of wood. Carter sits at his desk, boots on the corner, reading a tattered newspaper. Don't mind them, he says. The snorers wanted for horse theft. The other one turned himself in to avoid his mother-in-law. You glance at the whittler, who shrugs and says, "Best decision I ever made." You ladle out stew. It's thick brown and smells faintly like guilt. The men eat without complaint, which you take as a compliment. When you finish serving, Carter gestures to a corner chair. Set. You might as well learn how law really works. You do, half expecting a lecture on justice. Instead, he says, "See, most days it ain't shootouts. It's paperwork, fines, and people too drunk to remember which horse they rode in on. The trick is keeping order without killing the mood." That sounds exhausting, you say. He chuckles. That's why we nap between crimes. A moment later, the door bursts open. A woman storms in, face red, eyes blazing. "Sheriff!" "That man Stokes stole my chickens again." Carter sighs. "Ma'am, are you sure they were yours?" "I named them," she snaps. Gertrude, Beatrice, and Tiny Cluck. You bite your lip to keep from laughing. Carter doesn't even blink. "All right," he says. "I'll go talk to Stokes." He stands, grabs his hat, and gestures for you to follow. You might as well see what frontier justice looks like before lunch gets cold. The two of you walk down the street to a crooked house that smells like feathers and regret. Stokes answers the door. Barefoot, grinning, holding a half-eaten drumstick. "Afternoon, Sheriff," he says. Carter folds his arms. "Stokes, you want to explain why your dinner's clucking next door this morning?" Stokes looks at the drumstick like it betrayed him. Coincidence. A Carter sighs. "Stokes, if you don't give the lady back her remaining chickens, I'll lock you up with the horse thief again. And you remember how that went?" A Stokes pales. He snores like Judgment Day. He mutters, then nods. "Fine. She can have what's left." The sheriff tips his hat. "Good man." You watch this unfold in quiet amazement. No guns, no chase, just a verbal tug of war with poultry. Yet somehow it works. Back at the jail, Carter leans against his desk and says, "Justice isn't always bullets and gallows. Sometimes it's convincing a fool to do the right thing without making him realize it." You nod. So the badge is mostly psychology? He grins. Mostly lunch management. He's not wrong. You've barely finished cleaning up when someone else bursts through the door. A young cowboy with a hat too big for his head.
Sheriff! There's a mob forming at the livery! They're fixin' to hang that gambler Pike!
Carter groans, sets down his cup, and says, "Well, there goes my nap." You follow him again, heart thudding. The livery yard is packed. A swirling crowd shouting, pushing, faces red with anger. In the center stands Pike, hands tied, eyes wide. Someone's already thrown a rope over a beam. Carter steps forward, voice steady but sharp. "That's enough." No one listens. The crowd surges, heat and dust rising with every shout. You glance at the sheriff, wondering what he'll do. He doesn't reach for his gun. Instead, he grabs the nearest barrel, climbs on top of it, and bellows, "Anyone here ever seen Pike win a game fair and square?" The question stops them cold. A few murmurs ripple through the crowd. Someone laughs nervously. Someone else mutters, "Can't say I have." The Carter nods. "Exactly. The man's bad at cheating. You hang him for that. You're killing a public service." The crowd erupts into awkward chuckles. The tension loosens like a knot giving way. Carter seizes the moment. "Now, everyone go cool off. Pike, get out of town till next week. And if I hear about another brawl, I'll fine the whole saloon." Bit by bit, the crowd disperses, grumbling but calmer. Carter steps down from the barrel, wipes his brow and mutters, "Sometimes justice is 10% authority and 90% improv comedy." You can't help but laugh. And historians call this civilization. Historians, he says dryly, weren't here when people ran out of beer. There's your mainstream fact. Many frontier towns had vigilance committees, basically mobs pretending to be law enforcement when real lawmen weren't around. They could either save a town from chaos or make it worse. Historians still debate whether they represented true democracy or just mob rule with better hats. You and Carter walk back to the office as the sun slides low. The street glows gold, shadows stretching long. "So what happens to Pike?" you ask. Carter shrugs. "He'll show up again next month, broke and repentant. Happens like clockwork." You smile. "You ever get tired of cleaning up the same messes?" He thinks for a moment. "No. Because every so often, someone surprises you. They do something right, just because they can. That sticks with you." Later, as you lock up the office, Carter hands you a small badge. A star no bigger than a coin, dull and scratched. "Keep it," he says, "not official. Just a reminder that sometimes you help keep things from falling apart." You turn it over in your hand, feeling its weight. Not heavy, but meaningful. Your quirky tidbit of the night comes from Carter's dry humor. Apparently, some sheriffs used to fine saloon owners for excessive piano playing, because it incited brawls. Imagine getting arrested for over-enthusiastic ragtime. The stars rise again over the town, silver and sharp. You sit on the jailhouse steps, watching lamplight flicker across the dusty street. Somewhere in the distance, someone's laughing, someone's fighting, someone's praying. And here you are, half lawman, half spectator, realizing that order in the West wasn't about peace. It was about endurance. As the night settles deeper, the silence grows soft around you. The badge glints faintly in your palm. You tilt your head back, breathe the dry air, and murmur, "Still alive. Still trying." And for one fleeting second, the whole dusty world feels balanced. The sound that wakes you this time is a hiss. Not the human kind. The kind that doesn't need translation. You freeze instantly, blanket half, pulled over your head, brain trying to file through all the possibilities. Leaky kettle, angry cat, demonic wind. But then it comes again, low and rhythmic. And you realize with dread, soaked clarity, it's under the bed. You move very slowly, because out here in the West, There's really only one thing that hisses like that and isn't attached to a steam engine. You ease your boots onto the floor, slide the blanket aside, and see a flash of scales in the dim light. Of course, you whisper. That's not enough to be broke and sunburned. I've got a roommate now. The snake, unimpressed with sarcasm, rattles its tail in clear warning. The sound is smaller than you imagined, like dry beans shaken in a jar, but it cuts straight into your spine. You back toward the door, careful not to breathe too loudly. Out on the porch, you grab the nearest object that looks remotely weapon, like an old broom with about 3 bristles left. It's less a weapon, more a suggestion of cleanliness. The landlady pokes her head out from the kitchen. If you're planning to kill that rattler, she says, aim for the head, not the furniture. Last fella wrecked the whole room. Last fella survived. You ask hopefully. She shrugs. Define survived. You take a deep breath, step back inside, and start the most delicate duel of your life. The snake doesn't strike. It's coiled, waiting, tongue flicking in the air. You whisper a very polite apology to the universe, swing the broom like you mean it, and send the snake sailing out through the window in one miraculous motion. You stand there panting, broom trembling in your hands. The landlady leans in the doorway, slow clapping. Guess you're a local now, she says. Do I get a discount? On what, snake bites? No, but you get bragging rights. You laugh, though your heart's still hammering. Welcome to another day of why you wouldn't survive the Wild West. When you finally make it to the street, the sun's already crawling up the sky, hot and merciless. A few townsfolk nod your way. News travels fast, especially when reptiles are involved. The general storekeeper grins as you pass. Heard you took on a rattler this morning. That'll earn you a drink on the house, if you like your whiskey with the taste of fear. I'll pass, you say, still feeling the ghost of scales near your boots. He chuckles. Most folks do. After their first snake. Here's your historical fact for the section. Rattlesnakes were so common in frontier territories that snakebite remedies were practically an industry. Frontier doctors, when you could find one, carried everything from whiskey and ammonia to dubious rattlesnake oils that were 90% wishful thinking. And yes, that's where the term snake oil salesman comes from. Men sold miracle cures out of wagons, promising everything from pain relief to moral improvement. Historians still argue whether the earliest rattlesnake oil tonics worked even slightly. Some did contain omega-3 fatty acids, but that hardly makes up for the lack of antibiotics. You're pondering this when the town doctor himself appears, waving a hat to get your attention. You the one that killed the rattler. Evicted, you correct. Evicted is more accurate. Good enough. I could use a hand. You raise an eyebrow. You hiring? He nods. For about an hour. I'm short on steady hands, and my assistant fainted at the sight of a paper cut. You hesitate, then follow him. Curiosity always trumps caution with you. His office smells faintly of alcohol and despair. Jars line the shelves, filled with mysterious things floating in yellowish liquid. Some are herbs. Others you decide not to ask. Hold that tray, he says, gesturing at a set of metal instruments that look better suited to blacksmithing than medicine. What exactly are we doing? Stitching up a ranch hand who tried to teach his horse geometry. You blink. Geometry. He got kicked. The doctor explains flatly. The patient on the cot groans as the doctor works, muttering half apologies to the universe. You hand over tools, wipe sweat, and try not to pass out. The doctor hums softly while stitching, as if sewing flesh were just another kind of mending. When he finishes, he nods. You did fine. Better than my last helper. He screamed louder than the patient. You manage a weak smile. Do I get paid in coin or in snake oil? He chuckles. Neither, but I can give you a bottle of this. He holds up a small glass vial labeled tonic foar RVSA and RIHT maris. Gurinau sotai EFFET. You turn it over in your hand. What's in it? He shrugs. Mostly laudanum and hope. Is it safe? Historians still argue about that. You decide to pocket it anyway. The label's charm alone is worth keeping. When you step back outside, the sun's shifted past noon. The town shimmers with heat, air thick enough to chew. You wander toward the saloon for shade. Inside, it's cooler, darker, and, mercifully, snake-free. The bartender waves. Heard you're the Rattler Wrangler. That's what folks are calling you now. You groan. Please tell me that's temporary. Depends how long till someone else gets bit. You order water. Again, and he laughs. You're gonna ruin my reputation for selling actual drinks. As you sip, a wary man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers sits down beside you. Excuse me, he says. You ever heard of snake charm theory? You blink. Can't say I have. He leans closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. See, I'm writing a book. Gonna prove that music can pacify rattlesnakes. All it takes is the right rhythm. Been experimenting for weeks. You glance at his hand. It's bandaged. Deeply. How's that going for you? You ask. He sighs. Badly. The harmonica makes them angrier. You resist the urge to laugh. Maybe you're just hitting the wrong key. He beams.
Exactly.
I knew someone would understand. Your quirky tidbit of the section arrives right there. A few frontier enthusiasts genuinely believed that rattlesnakes could be soothed by music, much like cobras. There's even record of one man in Arizona claiming success, though witnesses later clarified the snake had been dead for 3 days. As the day drags on, you drift back outside. The town's quiet, except for the rhythmic squeak of the well pump. You lean against the trough, splash your face, and stare out at the desert beyond, the endless gold and red expanse shimmering like a mirage of promises. You think about all the remedies people sold each other out here. Tonics, prayers, dreams. How every bottle, every sermon, every tall tale carried the same message. This will fix what the desert broke. You pull the little tonic bottle from your pocket, hold it up to the sunlight. Inside, the liquid glows amber, tiny bubbles clinging to the glass. Maybe it's all nonsense. But the idea of comfort, even bottled, is hard to mock when you're this far from everything soft. The sun dips low, dragging the heat with it. The air cools just enough to feel alive again. You walk toward the outskirts of town, drawn by the quiet. Out here the grass crunches under your boots, brittle as parchment. The horizon glows orange, then purple, then the soft silver of approaching night. Somewhere nearby, a rattlesnake gives one last dry warning before slithering away. You freeze again, muscles tense, until the sound fades. Then, unable to help yourself, you mutter, "Go on. Find someone who still believes in snake music." The laugh that escapes you is small but real. As stars bloom across the sky, you lie back on a small rise outside town, watching them flicker awake. You can almost hear the hum of the earth cooling beneath you. And in that moment, you realize something: the Wild West wasn't just dangerous because of guns or heat or snakes. It was dangerous because it made you believe you could outsmart it. With grit, with hope, with a broom and dumb luck. You turn the tonic bottle in your fingers again, whispering softly, to nerves and nightmares. Then you close your eyes, the desert breeze brushing your face, and for once, your pulse slows to match the rhythm of the endless, indifferent land. The night begins the same way it always does out here. Slow, heavy, and sticky with the kind of heat that turns the air itself into a bad habit. You push open the saloon doors and step into the dim glow of oil lamps and cheap ambition. Inside, everything smells faintly of whiskey, wood polish, and the unspoken threat of violence. The piano's trying its best in the corner, a brave little tune battling the noise of boots, laughter, and glass. You half expect the keys to give up halfway through. The pianist, a man with a face like worn leather and eyes that haven't trusted anyone in a decade, glances up just long enough to nod. Out here, that's practically an embrace. You find a seat at a table near the back where you can watch without being watched. The chair creaks. Everything creaks in the West, even the silence. The bartender slides a glass toward you before you even order. "Water again?" he asks, smirking. "Hydration's underrated," you say. "Not out here. It's impossible." You glance around. A miner is arguing with a cattleman over a card game. A woman in a faded red dress leans on the piano, singing in a voice so soft it almost apologizes for existing. Her song drifts through the smoke, about lost towns and lost chances. The kind of tune that makes you want to drink, even if you've never liked alcohol. This is what passes for nightlife on the frontier: music, mirages, and men who pretend they don't miss home. You're halfway through your lukewarm drink when the saloon doors swing open again, hard enough to make the piano falter. A hush ripples through the room. He's tall, of course. They're always tall in these stories. Dust covers his coat like frost, and his eyes scan the room with the precision of a hawk. You lean back, whisper to yourself, "Here comes the trouble." The bartender mutters, "There goes my furniture." The stranger walks straight to the bar. "Looking for a man," he says. The bartender shrugs. "Aren't we all?" A few folks chuckle nervously, but no one moves. The stranger's hand drifts toward the revolver at his hip. "Name's Cooper. He owes me a debt." You notice a rancher in the corner freeze, eyes darting down. Cooper spots it too. The air grows thick, heavy with potential energy. You consider quietly leaving, but curiosity wins again. Then, before any bullet can test the room's acoustics, the woman by the piano steps forward. "Not tonight," she says, voice low but firm. "You want to settle something? Take it outside. I just got them to fix the windows from last time." For a moment, no one breathes. Cooper's jaw tightens, but he nods once and steps back. Outside it is. The room exhales as they walk into the night. The pianist picks up the tune again, this time slower, softer, a kind of musical sigh. You shake your head, smiling a little. "Every town's got one of those nights," you mutter. The bartender laughs. "Yeah." And every outsider thinks they'll survive it. He slides another glass your way, unasked. "On the house. You're either brave or foolish for staying this long. Either way, you earned it." You sip the drink. It burns like honesty. And just as you're starting to relax, a crash echoes from outside, followed by shouts. The entire saloon empties like a tipped bucket. You follow too, because of course you do. Out on the street, under a swollen yellow moon, Cooper and the rancher face each other. The air between them feels stretched thin. Nobody speaks. Even the cicadas seem to have paused. Then, two flashes, two cracks, and the smell of gunpowder curls into the night. When the smoke clears, both men are still standing, but only one holsters his gun. The other collapses into the dust, slow as dusk itself. The crowd murmurs. Someone mutters a prayer. Cooper just stares at the body, expression unreadable. Then he looks up, scanning the faces. You look away too late. His eyes meet yours. "You look like you understand debts," he says. You raise your hands slightly. "Only the kind I can pay with small talk." He snorts, almost a laugh, then walks off into the darkness. The crowd disperses, and the saloon starts filling again. Death here is like weather. It passes, and everyone keeps moving. Back inside, the bartender cleans a glass. "You see? That's why you wouldn't last here." You still flinch. Flinching seems like the reasonable option. You say, "Reasonable don't work west of the river," he replies. "Here's your historical fact for the section. Most gunfights in the Old West weren't cinematic duels at noon. They were usually drunken arguments, close, range, chaotic, and over in seconds. Historians still argue whether the romanticized showdown image came from dime novels or early traveling plays. It's probably both. You look around at the faces, tired, dusty, pretending not to care. The woman in red keeps singing, though her eyes are somewhere far away. You realize most folks here are actors in their own survival story, improvising the lines as they go. Hours pass, and the saloon starts to thin out. The card table's empty, now except for a few coins, and a deck warped by sweat. You find yourself helping the bartender sweep the floor. It's oddly soothing. He glances at him back east. Was it that obvious? He grins. You say please. That's the giveaway. You laugh softly. So how do people survive here? They don't, he says simply. They just keep pretending until the desert believes them. Your quirky tidbit of the section fits right there. Some saloons actually held politeness contests where patrons were fined for swearing. The fines went into a communal whiskey fund. It worked about as well as you'd expect. Outside, the night deepens, the stars bright and sharp enough to cut you. Someone starts playing a fiddle on the porch, slow and off-key, but beautiful in its loneliness. You step out, leaning on the railing, letting the sound wash over you. You think about the day, snakes, tonics, gunfights, and how this place never stops testing your threshold for absurdity. Still awake, the bartender calls. Barely. He tosses you a small cloth. Use that for a pillow. Floor's cleaner than most beds here. You grin. That's reassuring. As you settle down in a corner, the piano fades, the fiddle slows, and the saloon sinks into the sleepy hum of late night quiet. Your mind drifts, the world softening around the edges. Somewhere beyond the door, a coyote howls, long, haunting, familiar. You wonder if it's laughing at all of you. Morning again, though. Morning. Feels like a flexible term out here. The sun doesn't rise so much as attack, spilling gold light across the horizon, like it's trying to burn away what's left of the night. You wake up on the saloon floor, still dusty, slightly sticky, and miraculously alive. Someone's sweeping nearby. You blink through the haze and spot her, the woman in the faded red dress from last night. Her sleeves are rolled up, hair pinned haphazardly, eyes sharp and tired all at once. Morning, you croak. She doesn't look up. You snore like a tired mule. That's fair. She smirks, leaning on the broom. Most folks around here either drink themselves into silence or stop breathing altogether. You're one of the lucky ones. You sit up slowly, brushing hay. Or is that sawdust? Off your shirt. Thanks for keeping me from being mistaken for a rug. Didn't do it for you, she says. Do it every morning. One less thing that smells bad. You grin despite yourself. You ever take a day off? She stops sweeping, finally meeting your gaze. Out here, a day off's just another way of saying you've run out of luck. That lands harder than you expect. She goes back to work, the broom whispering across the floor. Name's Clara, she adds after a moment. I sing, clean, pour drinks, and break up fights when the menfolk get too loud. All at once. Sometimes in the same minute. Clara gestures toward the door. Breakfast is out back if you're brave enough. Cook's experimenting again. You follow her into the sunlight, squinting. The saloon's back lot is little more than a makeshift kitchen. An iron stove, a dented table, and a pot that's definitely seen better centuries. A stocky woman named Ruth stirs the pot with the authority of a general. What's on the menu? You ask. Beans, Ruth says flatly. Just beans. A surprise. Not really. The surprise is whether they're edible. Clara laughs softly. Ruth's the heart of this place. Tougher than any sheriff. Ruth snorts. Flattery don't wash dishes. As you eat, slowly, cautiously, you realize how rare women like them are in the stories you've heard. History books mention the outlaws, the lawmen, the dreamers, but rarely the ones holding it all together with grit and sarcasm. You've been out here long, you ask Clara. She shrugs. Long enough to know this town eats people alive, but not long enough to get eaten. You glance around at the quiet bustle of the morning. The piano tuner yawning on the porch, a ranch hand carrying water, a couple of kids chasing a dog down the street. For a moment, it almost looks like community. Why stay? You ask softly. She considers that, eyes narrowing toward the horizon. Because leaving means starting over. And I'm tired of starting over. The way she says it, steady, almost resigned, hits like a truth carved in stone. Here's your historical fact for the section. Women made up less than 10% of the population in many frontier towns during the mid-1800s. Most came as wives, widows, or workers, filling roles men didn't or wouldn't. Teachers, nurses, cooks, and yes, saloon singers. Historians still argue whether the West gave women more freedom, or simply a different set of cages. Clara finishes her breakfast and stands. You should talk to Miss Abigail. Runs the paper. Always looking for someone who can spell and doesn't drink ink. You blink. She hires strangers. Only if they don't die before the interview. Fair enough. You find Abigail's print shop on the edge of town. A small building that smells of paper, oil, and ambition. Inside, a printing press clanks rhythmically, like an impatient heart. A woman in spectacles glances up from her desk. You the wanderer? She asks. You nod. That's one of the nicer things I've been called. She smiles faintly. Good. I need someone to deliver tomorrow's issue. I pay $1.50 a slice of sanity. Deal. As you help her set type, you notice headlines about drought, politics, and something called the Temperance Parade. Abigail catches your glance. That'll be the church ladies trying to ban whiskey again, she says. They've got hymnals, I've got ink. We'll see who wins. You can't help laughing. Sounds like a fair fight. She smirks. Honey, there's no such thing. Ooh, your quirky tidbit of the section arrives right there. The Woman's Christian Temperance Union, formed in 1874, really did march through saloons singing hymns to shame drinkers, and sometimes they succeeded. Other times, the saloon owners joined in just to drown them out. By midday, you've finished the deliveries and earned your $1, already promised to the general store for soap. And maybe something edible. You return to the saloon, where Clara's teaching a couple of local kids how to scrub tables in exchange for leftover biscuits. Child labor. You tease. She shrugs. It's either that or gambling lessons. The kids grin, showing more dust than teeth. You join in the cleaning, feeling oddly at peace with the rhythm of the work. There's something grounding about wiping away the day's mess before it becomes history. You don't seem like you belong here, Clara says, not unkindly. Neither do you. She smiles. That's why I do. Evening creeps in again, painting everything in gold and rust. The piano starts up, and the saloon fills with laughter and boots once more. Clara's on stage, her voice weaving through the smoke and the chatter. You sit at the bar, sipping water again, feeling like you're watching the heartbeat of a world both crumbling and rebuilding itself every night. The bartender leans over. Just thinking, you say, careful. Thinking's a dangerous habit here. You smile. So I've heard. Outside, the sound of horses and distant thunder merges into a strange harmony. You glance toward the door, half expecting another gunslinger to appear. But tonight the trouble seems to rest. You notice a group of women at one corner table. Clara, Ruth Abigail, and two others you haven't met. They're talking low but laughing loud, passing around a flask like it's a trophy. For all the hardship, they look content. Maybe even proud. You realize this is their victory, existing loudly in a place that expects silence. When Clara catches you watching, she raises the flask in salute. You nod back. Later, as the night thins and the last drinkers stumble out, you stay behind to help close. Clara hums softly while stacking chairs. You ever think about what comes after all this? You ask. She tilts her head. After what? The dust, the saloon, the snakes. Everything. She smiles, wistful and a little sad. Maybe there's a place where no one's running from something. Until then, this'll do. Her words settle into you, slow and steady, like a tune that refuses to fade. As you walk back into the cool night, the stars stretch endlessly above. And for once, you don't feel like the main character in your own misfortune. You feel like a witness to survival, to stubbornness, to the quiet power of people who refuse to vanish. You lie down outside the saloon, using your coat as a pillow. The air smells faintly of smoke and soap. Somewhere inside, Clara's laughter drifts through the cracked window. You close your eyes, thinking that if anyone could survive a day in the Wild West, it'd be her. Morning breaks with a metallic clang, someone hammering horseshoes behind the blacksmith's shed. The sound rolls across town like a wake-up bell, reminding you that sleep is a luxury few people here can afford. You stretch, bones creaking in protest, and take a long breath of air that smells faintly of dust, smoke, and last night's whiskey spilled into the street. Clara's already sweeping the saloon steps when you shuffle past. She raises an eyebrow. Up early. Either you've gone respectable, or you're lost. Both, you admit, rubbing your neck. Good. The world needs more confused people. It keeps things interesting. She smiles, then adds, watch yourself today. There's been talk of riders on the ridge. The kind that don't send postcards. You nod and head toward the hitching post, trying not to think about how many times riders on the ridge has preceded bad news. The town's edge feels different this morning, quiet in a way that warns rather than soothes. Even the dogs are subdued, tails twitching low. A few shopkeepers stand outside, watching the horizon with the same uneasy hope people reserve for weather that might change everything. That's when you hear it hooves, distant but steady, like thunder that's made a deal with time. A dust cloud blooms on the ridge, moving fast. You squint and see maybe 5, no 6, riders cutting toward town. Their silhouettes are long, lean, and armed. You mutter, so much for a calm breakfast. A hand lands on your shoulder. It's Sheriff Grady, the town's reluctant symbol of order. His badge is tarnished, his shirt untucked, and his eyes are the color of overused coffee. Best stay inside, he says. Looks like the Carrigan gang again. You blink. You say that like they're regular customers, they are. Just bad at tipping. He adjusts his hat and strides toward the main street. The townsfolk scatter into doorways like cautious shadows. You predictably stay put, half hidden behind a wagon, because curiosity still hasn't learned self-preservation. The riders pull up at the saloon, dust swirling around them. Their leader, lean, dark, bearded, wearing a red bandana like punctuation, calls out,
"We're here for supplies and conversation. Nobody needs to get heroic."
Grady steps forward. You know the rules, Carrigan. No guns inside the saloon. We had to replace the mirror last time. Carrigan grins. Fair enough, Sheriff. But I'm feeling chatty, so maybe we talk right here in the street. The tension crackles, sharp as a drawn match. Then Clara steps out from the saloon, wiping her hands on her apron like she's dealing with unruly children instead of armed men. If you're here for supplies, she says evenly, you can wait your turn like everyone else. We open at noon. Carrigan's smirk falters. Mom, I admire your courage, but I ain't much for schedules." "Then you'll love disappointment," she replies. You swear the air itself hesitates. Even the sheriff seems unsure whether to intervene or take notes. Carrigan studies her for a long moment, then laughs. A deep, genuine sound that surprises everyone. "You've got more grit than half the men I ride with." "That's not a compliment," Clara says. "That's statistics." Laughter ripples through the watching crowd, tension easing just enough for the moment to hold. Carrigan tips his hat, signals his men, and they wheel their horses around. "Tell your sheriff to keep the roads open. We'll be back when the moon's fat again." As they gallop off, Grady exhales hard. "Remind me never to argue with you," he mutters to Clara. She smirks. "That'd be the smartest thing you've ever said." Once the dust settles, you finally step out from behind the wagon. "That could have gone worse," you offer. "Out here," the sheriff replies. "That's practically a celebration." Here's your historical fact for the section. Many so-called outlaw gangs in the late 19th century were less organized crime syndicates and more loose coalitions of desperate men. Displaced ranchers, failed miners, ex-soldiers. Historians still argue whether men like Jesse James were folk heroes or just opportunists with better branding. You help Grady haul a few barrels to the supply shed, while he mutters about how every outlaw claims to be misunderstood. "Used to be folks robbed banks," he grumbles. "Now they rob stagecoaches, trains, and the occasional Sunday picnic." "Picnics?" you ask. He nods. "Yep. Stole all the biscuits, left the preacher tied to a tree. Poor man still apologizing to God for the ants." By afternoon, the town resumes its rhythm. Blacksmith hammering, kids yelling, piano groaning in protest. But the quiet carries a nervous undercurrent. Like everyone's pretending the horizon isn't staring back. You wander to the stables, hoping a little honest labor might ease the unease. The stable hand, a teenager with more freckles than experience, hands you a pitchfork. "If you're gonna hang around, might as well make yourself useful," he says. You grin. "The frontier cure for anxiety." He snorts. "Nah, just cheaper than therapy." You spend an hour shoveling hay and pretending it's meditative. Horses snort softly beside you, big brown eyes watching like they're in on a joke you don't get. One in particular, a grey mare with a scar across her nose, keeps nudging your arm. "Easy," you whisper. "I don't have snacks or wisdom." The stable hand glances over. That one belonged to a bounty hunter. She don't forget faces. Where's he now? Under a different sky. Fair enough. By dusk, the heat gives way to a restless wind. The sheriff's back outside, lighting his pipe, while a few townsfolk trade stories on the porch. Clara's inside, singing something soft. A tune about crossing rivers and never quite reaching the other side. The sheriff looks up at the darkening horizon. "You know," he says, "some days I wonder if law's just another kind of mirage." You raise an eyebrow. "You're the law." He exhales smoke that drifts like ghost breath. "That's the problem." Your quirky tidbit for the section drifts in then. Some frontier sheriffs doubled as gamblers, bartenders, or even bouncers for the same saloons they were supposed to police. It wasn't corruption, it was necessity. When the population outnumbered the pay, justice became a part-time gig. Night falls heavy and wide, swallowing the last traces of color. You walk down the main street, boots stirring lazy clouds of dust. Lanterns flicker in windows, small defenses against the void. The town feels fragile tonight, like one wrong move could crack it open. You pause outside the saloon, listening to Clara's voice drift through the walls. Her song ends, replaced by applause and laughter. For a moment, everything feels almost civilized. You sit on the steps, lean back against the post, and stare at the moon climbing high. Somewhere out there, Carrigan and his gang are probably camping by a creek, dividing loot, toasting to luck. You wonder which side of the law you'd land on if survival were the only rule. Still awake. It's the sheriff again, passing by. Barely, you say. He nods toward the stars. Out here, the sky is the only witness that never lies. Remember that. Then he's gone, boots fading into the dark. You stay there a while longer, breathing in the scent of sage and smoke, listening to the night breathe back. Tomorrow will bring dust, or rain, or outlaws, or none of the above. But for now, the town sleeps under its fragile truce, and you, somehow, sleep with it. You wake to the smell of smoke, not the friendly kind that drifts lazily from breakfast fires, but the wild, dry, crackling kind that tastes like danger. By the time you stumble outside, the horizon's already orange. Not sunrise, something worse. A prairie fire, sweeping low and fast across the grasslands like a living thing. Clara's on the saloon porch, hair half tied, eyes sharp. It started near Dry Creek, she says. Wind's carrying it this way. You glance east. She's right. The wind howls with purpose, dragging heat and ash with it. It's beautiful. In that terrifying way nature sometimes is when it stops pretending to care about you. The sheriff's barking orders down the main street, directing townsfolk toward the well. Buckets, blankets, anything that can hold water. Everything's in motion. Even the piano man's helping, face slick with sweat. You grab a bucket, run to the well, and join the line. Water sloshes, hands slip, curses fly. The fire's still miles out, but you can feel its hunger already. Frontier rule number 1. The sheriff shouts. Fight it before it remembers you exist. A Clara passes you another bucket, expression grim. They say the land here was made to burn. You nod, throat dry. Then I guess we were made to sweat. It's a bad joke, but she still smirks. Maybe you'll survive after all. By midday, the fire's closer, a wall of moving light. The air glows like molten glass. You can hear the grass hissing as it dies. Horses scream in the distance. You've never felt so small? Here's your historical fact for the section. Prairie fires were one of the greatest threats to 19th century settlers. They could travel faster than a galloping horse, devouring miles of grass and timber in minutes. Some farmers tried to plow fire breaks, strips of bare earth meant to stop the flames. But success depended entirely on wind and luck. Historians still argue whether indigenous burning practices, used to manage the land long before settlers arrived, might have prevented the worst of those disasters. The sheriff's shouting again.
Form a line to the ridge!
We'll cut it off near the creek. You follow, bucket in hand, legs trembling. The heat's like standing in front of an open forge. Every breath tastes of ash and desperation. The wind shifts, cruel as ever, and now the smoke's rolling straight toward town. Visibility drops to a choking blur. You can barely see Clara ahead of you, her red scarf bright through the haze. She glances back, eyes watering. Don't stop. You don't. Not until your arms feel like lead and your boots start melting into the earth. Then, suddenly it happens. A gust. Stronger than the rest, sweeping the fire sideways. It misses the town by maybe 50 yards, turning instead toward the open plains beyond. The sheriff collapses to his knees, coughing out a half laugh, half prayer. Looks like Providence still reads our mail. You drop your bucket and sit in the dirt, watching the inferno fade into distance, leaving behind blackened earth and stunned silence. The next day, the sky's a strange pale color, grayish yellow, heavy with leftover smoke. The town smells like wet ashes. People move slow, as if afraid to wake the fire again. Ruth from the kitchen is handing out coffee and bread to anyone still standing. She spots you, thrusts a cup your way. Drink, she says. You've got that look, like you just saw the world blink. You take a sip. It tastes like burnt wood and relief. Down the street, Kids are already poking at the charred ground, marveling at the patterns the fire left behind. One picks up a half-melted horseshoe, holding it like treasure. You find Clara sitting by the well, sleeves rolled up, hair streaked with soot. She doesn't notice you at first, just stares at the horizon, eyes distant. "Hey," you say softly. She looks up, then sighs. "It's never over, is it?" You shake your head. "Not out here." She smiles faintly. That's the problem with the West. It keeps testing you like you're some kind of myth. You sit beside her. The silence between you feels earned. Later, as the afternoon cools, a shadow passes overhead, a hawk circling lazily. Its cry slices the air, high and thin, as if reminding the world that life keeps going, no matter how many fires try to stop it. You look toward the riverbed, where the water's low, but still moving. Steam rises where burnt branches fell in, twisting like ghosts. You can't help whispering, "Wes, we got lucky." "Luck," Clara murmurs, "or just slower doom." You laugh softly, cheerful as ever. "Someone has to balance your optimism," she says. As evening falls, a cold front sweeps through, the kind of drop that makes your bones remember winter. You wrap your coat tighter. The wind now carries not heat, but chill. That's the West for you. Fire one day, frost the next. You retreat to the saloon, where the survivors have gathered like pilgrims at a shrine. The piano's quiet, too soon for music. People talk in murmurs, half drunk on exhaustion. The sheriff sits near the window, boots off, bandaged hand resting on his knee. He glances your way. You ever notice how the land here don't care what you build? You can put up churches, saloons, dreams. It just waits to take 'em back. You nod slowly. Maybe that's what makes folks stay, to prove they can leave a mark that lasts longer than the dust. He chuckles. You sound like one of them poets. Poor career choice out here. Any career's a poor choice out here. Your quirky tidbit of the section shows up in the corner. A traveling salesman tells anyone who'll listen that prairie fires were caused by ski electricity, and that his copper rods could prevent them. He demonstrates by waving one around until lightning strikes a nearby fence. Nobody ever sees him again. The night deepens, quiet except for the soft creak of the saloon's rafters. Someone starts humming, a low, tired tune. Others join in, voices rough but warm. You step outside, letting the cold sting your face. The stars are back, sharp, clear, unashamed. The world looks scrubbed clean, like it's pretending nothing happened. You walk toward the edge of town, boots crunching over scorched ground. The earth's still warm beneath the ash. Steam curls from cracks like whispers escaping a secret. You crouch, scoop a handful of blackened soil, and let it sift through your fingers. It leaves smudges that won't wash off easily. You whisper, "Guess we all burn a little out here." When you finally lie down that night, wrapped in the faint smell of smoke and rain, your dreams flicker with firelight and frost. Two sides of the same relentless coin. The morning sun hits differently now, softer, almost apologetic. You wake with the lingering taste of smoke and ash in your mouth, a souvenir from yesterday's fire. The horizon glows with pink and orange. Like the West itself is nursing a slow bruise. Clara is already out front, sweeping again, her red scarf tied tight against the wind. She glances up at you. You up. Barely, you admit. Does it get easier? Depends what you mean by easier. She flicks the broom at a patch of dust. If you mean living. No. If you mean surviving, maybe a little. The town moves around you, a living clockwork. The blacksmith hammers, sparks flying like tiny fireflies. Kids chase each other down the street, giggling as if last night's chaos never happened. Horses stomp, sniff, and neigh, weaving an unseen rhythm into the day. You help carry water to the general store, buckets swinging, arms sore. The old storekeeper nods at you. You've got grit. he says. Better than most. Or maybe you're just stupid. Thanks, you reply. I'll take that as a compliment. He grins. Depends on how long you last. Here's your historical fact for the section. Frontier towns often relied on shared labor for survival. Bucket brigades, barn raisings, and fire watch parties were common. Historians still argue whether this community spirit was born of necessity or genuine camaraderie, though most agree it was a bit of both. By mid-morning, a courier arrives on horseback, dust cloud trailing behind like a signature. He hands a bundle of letters to the saloon, nods at Clara, and gallops off again. One of the letters is for you. You break the seal and find a crude map inside, accompanied by a note in uneven handwriting. If you want to see how the West really bites, follow the river to the old mill. Don't get lost. Clara leans over your shoulder. Someone's daring you into trouble. Typical day out here. You fold the map slowly. Trouble's practically a full-time job. But she shrugs. And somehow you signed up. By noon, you set off toward the river, boots crunching dry grass. The town shrinks behind you, but you can still hear the faint hum of life. The piano from the saloon, laughter from the children, Clara's voice carrying on the wind. The riverbank is a ribbon of silver, cutting through green and gold fields. You follow it, careful not to slip on the slick rocks. The map leads you to the old mill, a skeletal structure, rotting wood groaning in the wind. Inside, dust motes dance in the sunlight streaming through broken boards. You tread carefully, every creak underfoot amplified in the hollow space. Suddenly, you hear movement, scraping, dragging, something alive. You freeze, heart thundering. A fox, maybe, or a badger, emerges from a corner, eyes gleaming like small lanterns. It darts past and disappears. You exhale. Frontier wildlife, keeping you humble. The old mill has more than animals. A stash of forgotten tools lies scattered. Axes, scythes, buckets, and a suspiciously intact rifle. You pick it up, weighing it in your hands, feeling the history in cold iron and wood. The wind whistles through the broken windows. You swear it carries voices, men from decades past, women calling children home, miners cursing luck, and maybe the distant echo of rattlesnakes. You notice etchings in the wall, names, dates, even a crude heart carved by someone long gone. It feels intimate, almost like the mill remembers everyone who ever dared to step inside. You gather a few tools, thinking they might come in handy if the town ever needs rebuilding after the next fire, or flood, or outlaws. The weight is grounding. Back outside, the river moves steadily, oblivious to human concerns. You watch the reflection of clouds skimming the surface, thinking about how quickly this quiet can turn violent. Here's your quirky tidbit. Many abandoned mills in frontier towns became informal message centers, where travelers left warnings, maps, or small trinkets for those who came after. Some messages were practical, others were just lonely scribbles. Historians still debate how often these notes were read versus ignored entirely. You sit by the riverbank, legs dangling toward the water, and study the map again. It's crude, but it feels alive, a promise of adventure, danger, or at least distraction from the monotony of surviving another day. Hours pass, and the sun drifts low. The wind shifts, carrying scents of distant pine, wet earth, and smoke from last night's fire. You realize that for all the chaos, the town still exists, still thrives on small victories and stubborn routines. As you stand to leave, you hear a faint splash in the river. Nothing appears, but the sound lingers, echoing like a reminder out here. Nothing is predictable. Every footstep, every breath is part of the ongoing negotiation between human will and the wild. Clara's voice drifts faintly from the direction of town. Don't forget, surviving isn't just about muscle or luck. Sometimes it's knowing when to run, when to stay, and when to laugh. You smile. I think I'm getting the hang of it. The sun sets behind distant hills, and the river glows in molten gold and silver. You trace its flow with your eyes, thinking about all the lives that crossed this water, all the hands that lifted buckets, all the voices that sang through fire, frost, and dust. And you wonder, with both trepidation and awe, if your own story will leave a mark here, or if it will simply vanish into the same wind that carved this land. The morning comes soft, almost gentle after yesterday's river expedition. The sun rises in pale streaks, and the town seems to be breathing slowly, recovering from fire, wind, and chaos. You stretch, feeling sore in muscles you didn't even know you had, and notice Clara, sitting on the saloon steps, eyes closed, a thin breeze tussling her hair. "You're up early," you mutter. "Someone has to make sure the saloon doesn't collapse while the world's asleep." She replies, eyes still shut. "Or while the world's awake. Honestly, same difference." You sit beside her. Silence stretches comfortably, broken only by distant hammering and the occasional bark from the outskirts. The day's task, apparently, is simple: help rebuild a fence along the southern pasture. Simple only in name. The previous fire left it in pieces, and the cattle are already nosing dangerously close to the town's supply sheds. You grab a hammer and a few planks. The wood is dry and splintered. Nails bend if you hit them wrong. Your hands ache quickly, but the rhythm is oddly satisfying. The tactile, heavy satisfaction of making something last when so much else can vanish. Clara works beside you, methodical and steady. Her hands are strong, scarred, efficient. You realize how indispensable she is, not just for survival, but for the heartbeat of this small town. As you drive nails into posts, she hums a faint tune. It's the same melody she sang in the saloon, but slower, softer, almost meditative. You let it anchor your thoughts. The sheriff passes by, tipping his hat. "Need another pair of hands." "I'm already working," you say. You're learning fast. Out here, speed often equals survival. The sun climbs higher, sweat running into your eyes. The horses in the nearby corral watch your progress like spectators at a slow duel. Occasionally one snorts or swishes its tail, reminding you that even in labor, the wild is never far. A man approaches, a surveyor, clipboard in hand, measuring tools dangling. He's official looking, though out here that means only that he isn't waving a gun. "Mapping land for new homesteads," he explains. "You might want to stay out of the path of progress." You glance at Clara. "Land surveying? Sounds peaceful." She laughs. Peaceful is a word reserved for towns that don't exist in the West. Here's your historical fact for the section. After the Homestead Act of 1862, land surveyors played a crucial role in dividing Western territories into manageable plots. Homesteaders relied on their measurements, though disputes often erupted over errors, fences, and water rights. Historians still argue whether these surveys truly benefited settlers or primarily facilitated government and railroad interests. You spend the afternoon lifting hammering and adjusting fence posts. By evening, a long stretch of straight, usable fence stands between the pasture and the town. You step back, arms trembling, and admire the line like a small victory against chaos. Clara wipes her brow. Not bad for someone who arrived yesterday. You weren't expecting much, huh? She smirks. I expected you'd make it worse, honestly. But this'll do. Your quirky tidbit, some frontier settlers marked fence lines with notches in posts. Codes that only locals understood. Distance to water, grazing quality, or warnings about snakes. Outsiders often mistook these for arbitrary scratches, but they were survival guides written in plain sight. As the sun dips, painting everything in amber and violet, the town gathers near the new fence. Children play cautiously near the posts. Cattle stand resignedly behind, and Clara watches, satisfied. You feel the rare, almost foreign sensation of contributing something lasting. Later, at the saloon, the town celebrates quietly. Coffee, bread, laughter, and low conversation. The piano hums a new tune. Clara, again, is the steady center, checking on everyone while still singing softly. You sit back, bruised and tired, thinking about fences. Not just the physical ones you hammered, but the metaphorical lines people draw to survive. Boundaries, limits, and the stubborn insistence to keep danger outside. And you realize the Wild West is less about adventure or romance, and more about small victories, repeated every day, until survival itself becomes art. The stars emerge again, cold and unblinking, reflecting off the calm river. Somewhere far off, a coyote howls. The wind moves over the fence, bending it gently, reminding you that even your best efforts are at the mercy of the land. You lie on the saloon steps, watching the night unfold, thinking about fences, fire rivers, and all the human stories stitched between them. The next morning greets you with an almost mocking clarity: blue sky, sharp sun, and the faint smell of sage drifting on a warm wind. You wake with stiff muscles, the fence still proud behind you, and a quiet sense that the day has nothing simple in store. Clara is already outside, humming softly while brushing the dust off the saloon steps. "You alive?" she calls without looking up. "Somewhat," you reply, flexing aching arms. She smirks. That's the first miracle today. The town moves slowly into its routine. The blacksmith hammers, the stable hand sweeps, and the general store opens its doors. Even the piano tuner is back on the porch, testing a few notes as if daring the world to care. By mid-morning, a rider approaches from the ridge. The town tenses automatically. Hands hover near holsters, children are ushered inside. And Clara mutters something about bad timing. The rider is a messenger from a neighboring settlement, bringing news of a severe drought moving through the region. Crops are failing, cattle are thirsty, and towns downstream might be forced to relocate entirely. The sheriff sighs heavily. And just when we thought fire was our main problem. You follow the discussion, realizing that survival here is a constant negotiation with the elements: wind, water, fire, and temperature, all capable of undoing months of work in an afternoon. Here's your historical fact for the section. Droughts frequently struck the American West in the late 19th century, sometimes lasting multiple years. Settlers often relied on wells, irrigation, and careful livestock management to survive. Historians still argue how effective these early water management strategies truly were, given the unpredictability of the weather and geography. By noon, townsfolk gather near the river to discuss water rationing. Clara moves between groups, offering guidance, calming fears, and organizing tasks. Her authority is quiet but absolute. People trust her instinctively. You notice a group of young boys playing near the riverbank, testing whether the water level has dropped overnight. One of them almost slips but is caught by a rancher, and everyone exhales as if the near miss were a small victory. Clara walks up to you. You've noticed, haven't you? The West isn't about heroics. It's about noticing the little things. The water levels, the fences, the fires. The people who actually keep the town breathing. You nod. Seems exhausting. Exhaustion is survival's favorite companion. She replies. The rest of the afternoon passes in a haze of labor and observation. You help transport water, reinforce fence lines, and make minor repairs around the town. Even the piano man lends a hand, carrying boards with surprising dexterity. By late afternoon, the air grows hotter, wind shifting unpredictably. A dust storm gathers on the horizon, sending small animals scurrying and the townsfolk into motion once more. Your quirky tidbit in some frontier towns. Children were enlisted to carry water or gather firewood as part of their daily education. Parents argued that teaching responsibility this way prepared them for life's constant challenges. Skeptics claimed it was just free labor, but most kids seemed to develop impressive endurance and patience. You find yourself watching Clara direct operations near the well. Every gesture, every instruction is precise. She's like a conductor of chaos. Night falls slowly, turning the sky purple and red, streaked with drifting dust. The saloon lights flicker on, casting long shadows over the street. People gather inside, tired but alive, their movements ritualized by habit and necessity. The piano resumes its slow, melodic lament. Clara sits nearby, singing softly again, her voice carrying a subtle warning and reassurance at the same time. The sheriff leans against a post outside. "Tomorrow brings another challenge," he says quietly. "Is that all it ever does?" you ask. "Pretty much," he replies. "But that's what keeps it interesting." You sit on the steps, watching the stars emerge through the settling dust. The wind hums against the buildings, carrying whispers of cattle, rivers, and distant fires. You realize that survival here is not about avoiding hardship. It's about learning to dance with it, step by careful step. By bedtime, you're exhausted, suit streaked, and oddly grateful. The town has survived another day, and so have you. For tonight, the West holds its breath, and you, too. Let yourself sink into the rare comfort of quiet. The morning arrives soft, tentative, as if the West itself is testing your resolve one last time. You wake to the low hum of the saloon's floorboards, the scent of baking bread, and strong coffee weaving through the air. Clara is sweeping, her red scarf now frayed, but still tied tight around her neck. "You survived," she says without looking up. "Barely," you reply, stretching sore arms. "Good. That's one step closer to not embarrassing yourself entirely." She smirks, then pauses. "Or maybe that's 2 steps. I lost count. The town is calm this morning, but you know better." Out here, calm is temporary, a fragile veil over chaos waiting for a chance to bloom. By mid-morning, you're helping the sheriff repair a collapsed fence along the northern ridge. The work is steady, repetitive, grounding. You drive nails, lift posts, and curse the stubborn planks under your breath. Nearby, Clara organizes a small group of children to carry water and sweep streets. Their laughter is faint but persistent, rising above the steady hammering. You notice how central she is to the town, not just for survival, but as a quiet fulcrum holding everyone together. A distant wind rattles the saloon windows, carrying scents of dust, smoke, and river water. Somewhere beyond the horizon, life continues. Rivers run, animals graze, and the occasional coyote howls, a reminder that the world is indifferent. Here's your historical fact for the section. Frontier towns frequently relied on collective labor and ingenuity to survive, from building fences to fighting fires to tending crops. Historians still debate how much of this community resilience came from necessity versus personality. The stubbornness of individuals like Clara, who refused to let the town fall. By afternoon, a traveling trader arrives, wagon creaking under heavy loads. He exchanges goods for stories, gossip, and a bit of coin. You help unload supplies, marveling at the odd mix of practical tools, food, and objects clearly meant to charm rather than serve. You've learned a lot in a short time, Clara says, walking past with a small bundle of firewood. Most people don't last a week. Lucky or stubborn? You ask. Stubborn enough to be lucky, she replies. The sun dips low, turning the sky amber and violet. The town gathers near the saloon, sharing food, laughter, and quiet reflection. The piano plays a soft, almost mournful tune, while Clara sings the same melody she has since you arrived. It's familiar, comforting, yet tinged with the reality that tomorrow, and the day after, will bring more work, more danger, and more lessons. Your quirky tidbits. Some frontier towns held informal story nights, where locals shared news, tall tales, or warnings about dangers. These gatherings were a mix of entertainment and survival strategy, one part folklore, one part practical education. As darkness falls, you finally lie on the saloon steps, staring at the sky. Stars blink through the dust, indifferent but constant. You breathe in the smells of sage, wood smoke, and baked bread, feeling the subtle pulse of the town's life. The sheriff mutters nearby. You learn something every day, even if it's just how much dust one person can carry. You smile softly, thinking about all the fires, fences, floods, and outlaws you've witnessed. You think about Clara, Ruth, Abigail, and the countless others who keep the town alive. And you realize that survival is less about courage or luck and more about persistence, adaptation, and small, repeated victories. The night deepens. The piano slows, voices quiet, and the wind carries the faint murmur of distant rivers. You close your eyes, letting the town's rhythm lull you. The West is harsh, relentless, absurd, but somehow, in its own stubborn way, it also feels like home. Wind, down the day's adventures fade, leaving a gentle, persistent hum of life. Your body sinks into the steps, tired yet unbroken, while the night wraps the town in its quiet, protective cloak. Somewhere in the distance, a river gurgles, carrying whispers of yesterday, today, and the uncertain tomorrows that follow. Breathing slows, muscles relax. The fire's threat and the dust storm's sting exist only as memories now, soft and distant, cushioned by the warm embrace of routine. The town exhales with you, the piano humming the faint echo of human perseverance, and Clara's voice lingers, a lullaby threaded with strength and laughter. Your mind drifts across fences, rivers, and charred earth, tracing the patterns of survival etched into every corner of this rugged landscape. You think of the people you've met, the small victories that matter more than legends, and the quiet power of daily resilience. Stars glimmer overhead, endless and patient, their light folding softly into the night. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant bark of a dog, the sighing wind, is a gentle reminder that the world continues, no matter the chaos it contains. The lessons of this land settle slowly. Courage is quiet, survival is persistent, and life's beauty often hides in the ordinary. You feel the calm seep into your bones, a soothing rhythm that promises the world can be harsh, yet still tender. And as your eyes close, the West whispers softly, you may not have survived every trial perfectly, but you've endured, observed, and grown. Sleep now, letting the hum of history, hardship, and quiet triumph carry you gently into dreams.